Today, we're going to be talking to Dr. Burton, a wonderful lady that's dealing with women's issues in psychology. So, I am going to kindly let her in so we can talk to her about the effects of perhaps COVID has on women's health and other issues. So, once again, please help me welcome Dr. Jazmine Burton. Hello,
Hi there.
how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you for coming on our show, Dr. Burton.
Abs- Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. For our viewers, Dr. Burton is one of our panel pearls. She is going to be giving us lots of information about women, their health, hopefully, and other information that in these trying times will help us to pretty much better understand ourselves. So, Dr. Burton, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, things like that.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for having me here. I am a Bronx born and raised. So, born and raised in the Bronx, yes. And just, I was a little girl that just grew up just having a natural curiosity about people, what motivated them, and what drove them, and also the factors that contributed to people being resilient when they were struggling.
Hmm.
So, that was just something that I was always curious about, and that just led me to psychology. So born and raised in the Bronx, New York, educated in New York, did undergrad and my master's in upstate New York. And then I relocated to Houston, Texas to pursue my doctoral degree. Had some phenomenal experiences there. I've been blessed to work in a lot of different settings. So you name it, I've been there. I've worked in community mental health, psychiatric hospitals, prisons, an abundance of different settings, but I've been blessed to be able to focus that work in those settings on women, specifically on Black women and their mental health experiences and their concerns. And so currently I'm working as a licensed psychologist in private practice. My business is Essence Psychological Health Services. And there we put at the forefront the mental health of women, children, and families.
Wow. I mean, that is so much, such a lot of information to absorb. So, yes, of course, you're from the Bronx. I know you're on. I grew up with her. We went to school together. We love you, Jackie. My best friend. It's just wonderful to hear. Oftentimes we don't hear the positive part of when people grow up, where they're from, how they made it out, perhaps of, specific types of neighborhoods. And you can attest to that. I can attest to that. But a lot of times people look at, especially women of color, as, angry or welfare or, trying to strive for this and strive for that and not getting a lot of things done. And you are living proof that that's a stigma that should not exist. I'm that example as well. And, just to hear your path, your information, the things that you've gone through, it should be rewarding to viewers. It should be rewarding to young ladies who are also listening in that you can do it if you want to. And put out the information, start being able to educate yourself and continue the education so that you too can be better in life into where you want to be. So thank you so much. You are just so beautiful. So you mentioned that, it started when you was a little girl.
Yeah.
Was there like someone specifically that like threw you over that edge and said, you know what, this is why I want to do this? Or was it just
Yeah.
you saw a need?
That's a great question. I think it was a mix of both. So growing up in the Bronx, New York, it is a community in which there are a lot of people that were struggling. And so growing up, seeing that, just me being a naturally curious kid, I was wondering, okay, so how is it that people are struggling, but they're still making it by? How is it that people are struggling, but we can still see joy? So it was really about resilience despite struggle, and being able to talk to my mom, who was trained as a social worker, and she was able to kind of, process those questions with me and kind of direct me in the direction and the path that I ended up on, just being able to talk to her, but then also to see the other women in my family that were doing so many things. And so much of the work that they were doing was about public service to the community. So, my mom directed me in the path of psychology and mental health, but the family that I grew up and was nurtured by directed me on the path of service. So I think just naturally growing up in my community, being nurtured by the mom that I have, and also just having the family members that I have that are caregivers. So I have teachers, postal workers, substance use educators in my family. And so, having that foundation of service to your community, that really benefited me and just ultimately guided me on the path that I've been on.
That's awesome. And yes, you were surrounded and still are surrounded by amazing individuals. Of course, I have a biased opinion on that, but I've met them, I know them, and yes, you were surrounded, and still are surrounded by some amazing people. So that is really good. So when we talk about women and their health, specifically women of color, how do you think COVID-19 has affected that, if it has an impact at all? I mean, we're living in a situation right now where, minorities are not all the way up on that pole of understanding the economy, and just being, especially women being the head of the household in most cases. How do you think that, like I said, in your professional knowledge and opinion, how has that affected their mental health or their physical health?
Yeah. So, COVID has had a profound impact on everyone. But, what is true within historically marginalized communities of color, Black Americans and Black women, is that it's just compounded the impact of all of the other stresses that we were previously experiencing. So, one of the things that we have to think about when we're trying to understand Black women's mental health, or women's mental health in general, is that when it comes to specific mental health disorders, men and women have an equal likelihood of experiencing some disorders. However, women are going to be predisposed to certain historical and social factors that are going to increase their likelihood of experiencing it. So many women went into COVID as moms, wives, caregivers, just wearing multiple hats. And so when you're wearing multiple hats, then you're going to be experiencing role strain. So just the pressure of doing all of those things. So if you go into COVID with all of that pressure, and then you add on to it the complexities of COVID. So you add on to it the stress of the health risk of COVID. You add on to it the financial crisis. You add on to it to the uncertainty of change. You add on to it, having to educate from home, having to add on the virtual education. You add on working from home, you add on all of those layers, it's going to increase the likelihood that someone is going to be experiencing a mental health disorder. So there's going to be the stress, that's going to be the normal reaction to all of the changes that we're experiencing, but that prolonged stress can contribute to the development of a serious mental health condition. And so in my practice, where I serve women exclusively, I found that there's definitely been an increase in the requests for services, because people are trying to figure out how to navigate all of the layers of their experience while also dealing with COVID. Because what COVID did is it shook everything up for everyone. So our idea of what was normal, what was expected, all of that changed so drastically. And it changed with not a lot of relief, with not a lot of direction, with no idea about when things were going to go back to what we felt was normal. So many people have just been seeking services, trying to figure out, okay, how do I make it from day to day? An added layer that I've been seeing with many of the people in my practice is that, it took away the social aspect. So for many of us, the manner in which we navigate all of the layers of our lives, all of our roles and our responsibilities, is through our connections to other people. But with COVID, it enforced isolation in many instances. So for people that used to, unwind at the end of their week by going to happy hour, hanging out with their girlfriends, going to church, that was no longer an outlet. That went away. So you're dealing with the stress, you're dealing with the uncertainty, and now you're dealing with